the director of the Fauquier Public Library, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today for the first of what we hope will be a series of interesting, provocative conversations throughout the year. First of all, I have to thank Doug Larson and Lou Emerson for responding to my call for help to get this series started. They both agreed to use their knowledge and interest in the community to bring to you what we hope will be a series that lasts for a very long time. So when we got together in March to discuss what was going to be the first session, there was no question it would have to be Hope Porter. And I can tell by your enthusiastic response that Hope needs no introduction. And neither does Lou, for that matter. So I'm just going to turn the program over to them today. What we envision is Lou interviewing Hope, and hopefully there'll be time after for a few questions from you all, and then we have refreshments, and so we're in no hurry, and we hope you aren't either, and without further ado, I turn it over to our guests.
Thank you. So I'm hoping we can keep it kind of quiet because the acoustics in here are a little tough. I know you're going to want to clap a lot for Hope and none for me, and that's okay. Mrs. Porter,
yes.
May I call you Hope today?
Yes, you may.
Good. How's the gardening? Let's start.
I thought you did it anyway.
Oh, well, I'm never sure. Let's start with the easy stuff. How's the garden these days?
Garden is flourishing.
Really?
A little dry.
A little dry. I understand that you're a chronic, maybe a compulsive weeder.
I have been forced into it.
And I understand sometimes
Circumstances have forced me.
an unnamed family member tells me you occasionally use unusual tools. No?
Really?
Flatware?
Such as?
Flatware, sterling silver flatware. That's a rumor. That's not true.
That was my mother.
Oh, okay. Never done it. Okay, well, let's have a little fun. A lot of things to talk about, and forgive me if I skip around because my brain is not as well organized as yours. You've been known to go pretty far to make your point and to get the attention of people whose decisions you hope to influence. And I want to go back to 1994 to the Disney debate and Gold Cup of 1994. What do you remember about that day?
I remember being arrested. I was wearing a skirt that had a Mickey Mouse. No, it was a cardinal, Virginia cardinal, holding a very dead Mickey Mouse in his beak. Mm-hmm. And the governor had come, and the supervisors had told the sheriff they didn't want to have any trouble because the governor is here. Mm-hmm. And so I was arrested. And as I was taken off up to the paddy wagon, I heard these little cries, these voices in one of the covered trucks that the police had. Mm-hmm. And they said, "Hello, we're in here." And this is a bunch of my pals who were dressed up as Mickey Mouse, and they were doing some sort of a thing, which the governor wasn't supposed to see.
A protest.
Anyway, it was a...
So, as I understand it...
Let me interrupt for just 1 minute. I'm sorry. We're having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Do you mind?
No. Can you do it?
Well, I got to put my glasses on.
I'm not sure if... Want me to hold it?
Yes, that'd be better. Why don't you hold it?
Okay.
All right? Let's try now.
Okay.
Just do 1, 2, 3 to see if they could hear you.
1, 2, 3.
We're good?
1, 2, 3. Okay.
So, The way I read the story, Ann Douglas got arrested first, or detained. You weren't technically arrested, were you?
She got arrested, yes.
Okay. And they were leading her away, and at that point you decided to don this T-shirt that had...
No, I guess I did. I guess I put it on, yeah. But anyway, they didn't take me off the property, but they were planning to.
Right. Because Alan...
But I did at that meeting, I did have 2 airplanes that came in with it. We had a great big sign saying, Disney, don't sell Virginia or something. And that this long streamer, and it was flying in just as the governor's plane flew in. So I thought that was pretty successful.
Nice.
But I'll tell you another funny thing. The Board of Supervisors had the sheriff up on the carpet at their next meeting, and they were complaining that he hadn't done his job of keeping the peace. And he said, well, I must have done a pretty good job because Nick Arenal just sent me a bunch of roses, and they're sitting on my desk.
A month later, you attended the Lion King preview at the Uptown Theater in D.C. Were you involved in that?
I do remember that.
And what happened there?
Well, I remember there were lots of important black cars. It was the opening of a Disney movie, and so there were a lot of big shots, and they had a lot of big black limousines. And I stuck anti-Disney signs on them. That was about all I did there.
Nothing to it.
Is this working? Nope.
I'm sorry.
Because you're gesturing and it's not picking it up, so let's try again, all right? That's all right. Try now.
How's that?
That's
Is it better?
Yeah.
When the Disney thing started, did you and others rallied quickly at the Plains, I recall, on a Sunday night, and somebody stood up or by the end of the evening you had pledges for $1 million for the battle. Is that accurate?
I think so.
So as that thing unfolded, did you all really expect that you would be able to stop this huge entertainment?
Well, I think we were very worried about it. I think it was kind of a long shot.
So what turned the tide?
I think one of the things that happened was we had a very cold winter that year. And Disney in Paris was having a very difficult time because of the cold weather. And I think perhaps they thought that with all the protests, I think the climate the harsh winter may have decided them that it wasn't a good place to have it.
Okay.
That's my own personal opinion. I don't know that anybody else thinks that. Georgia would know.
Enlisting of David McCullough and a few other well-known historians probably didn't hurt.
Yeah, I would be interested.
Let's go way back. In what I've read, it seems to me that your unusual childhood...
I was what?
What I would call an unusual childhood. Let's talk for a few minutes about growing up here and what your family went through in the Depression, your early childhood, and then World War II.
Well, the lucky thing for me was that they didn't send me to school till I was 10.
So what did you do during the day?
I rode my pony.
Wow. Where?
All over the place.
How far?
10 or 15 miles.
Wow.
From Buckland to Casanova to the Springs. Not working? Oh, dear.
I'm just going to stand here. Go ahead.
Oh!
Are you sure?
No. I can hold it. Let me hold it. I can hold it.
No, what happens, Hope, is you start gesturing and then we lose you.
Oh, okay.
All right. Now, if she's looking your way, I think it'll be okay.
Okay. So you're riding all over Fauquier, getting to know the place better and better as an 8, 9-year-old?
Well, it was. I grew up at a very fortunate time because there happened to be a whole bunch of young people my age, everybody born in 1924. And we all had ponies and we all rode like mad. And we all roamed the countryside. And that went on for years and years.
Tough times for your family, you've written, that they had a difficulty hanging on to Hope Field.
Yeah, it was for sale for years. And it was a very, very dark cloud that hung over me because it meant going to Washington, losing my pony, and losing all my friends. So it was a very, when people came to look at the house, I was pretty sad.
Potential buyers.
Yeah.
It got that serious. Wow. Yeah. And you understood that as a 8, 9-year-old?
Oh yeah, and it would have. We would have moved to Washington, and it would have been the end of everything that I loved.
But things got better, and you started school.
Yeah, I went to the Calvert School here in Warrenton. I used to ride my pony up the Blackwell Road. My mother would ride with me, and she would lead my pony. Let me off at the bottom of the courthouse hill, and she would lead my pony back, and I would trudge up the hill, and then down Culpeper Street.
I think in your writing you mentioned that your parents brought a load of books out to the home or something, and that sort of began your formal education?
Well, we had a lot of books, and I had a English nurse who was a wonderful reader, and a mother who was a wonderful reader, and an aunt who was a wonderful reader. And so they read. I was sick a good bit of the time, and they read to me in relays, nonstop. So I did read a lot of books.
Any favorite books from that period that you still think of?
Well, I like the Thackeray books. I don't know. I guess I like them all pretty much.
So Calvert School, and then what? Calvert School went to what? 8th grade?
Calvert School went to 6th.
6th grade.
And then we skipped the 7th grade and went to the Warrenton Country School, which was the only French school in America. And we were a little bunch of day students. We spoke French all day.
Wow.
And that lasted 5 years, and they were miserable. I hated it.
How's your French these days?
Terrible.
Okay.
My Aunt Douglas says, when we're in France, she says, Mommy, please just pretend you don't speak any French.
So then you mentioned during World War II that you worked for the ration board?
Yeah, the ration board was right there in the Hayden building. And we rationed gas for the whole county. I did that until I was 20 and got married.
And you must have met a lot of people through that.
I did. I met a lot of people. I met a lot of people from the southern part of the county, which I didn't know anything about. And we went down to Catlett to ration sugar or something, just for 2 or 3 days. And that was the first time I'd ever been in the southern part of Fauquier County.
Wow.
And I met a lot of people that way, and it was a very good experience from that point of view. And it was a wonderful job for me. But and it went on for 3-4 years, I think.
And then in 44, you met a soldier.
Is what?
You met a soldier in 44, in 1944.
I did what?
You met a soldier?
Oh, yeah, I met a soldier on the... over Portnoy's store opposite the post office. And we were told we had to go and entertain the soldiers, and my friend Emily Nelson we didn't want to go. And her mother said, now girls, you never know when you're going to meet your husband. So I did.
And it proved true.
And he was a good thing for Fauquier County.
Fortuitous, an MIT-educated planner, right?
Very lucky for this county, because he saw what was beginning to happen with the urbanization of the county.
And pushed the supervisors.
And he pushed the supervisors, and they got the planning commission started. And then he served on that planning commission.
Okay.
And so his being there was a lucky thing.
But things were sort of quiet. There were a couple of subdivisions that came along.
Yeah, they were starting in the northeastern part of the county, which was nearest to Washington. and it was beginning to creep. And he, because he was seeing this happening in Montgomery County and Fairfax County, and this had never happened before, what was happening after World War II. And it was a totally new picture, and nobody was aware. And he saw it happening because he was seeing the edge of Washington coming down.
A little closer.
And so he was able to get things started in Fauquier County before it was too late.
But things were still relatively quiet until 67, 68.
Yeah, and then the first thing that really got our attention was the Bethel subdivision. And that was being built right on top of Warrenton's water supply. And it was 150 septic tanks draining directly into Cedar Run. And so that was a wake-up call. And that started us off.
But then North Wales.
And that put us in a position to cope with North Wales. Because if North Wales had come first, I think we would have lost the county.
Well, it sounded as if you were very close to losing the North Wales battle.
I was what?
Close to losing the North Wales battle.
Oh, I think we were very close.
The supervisors voted 3-2 ultimately.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
For the zoning, right?
And a great many people thought this was a wonderful thing because it was going to lower people's taxes, they thought. And so you were battling not only the developer, but you were battling most of Fauquier County because they thought it was the wrong thing to fight this thing. And of course, the editor of the paper was 100% for the Cooper Company. And that was a disaster for us.
What was it like as a woman in the 60s? I know there were men involved in the effort, your husband and others, but suddenly you were increasingly in the position, I assume, of doing what you've continued to do, and that is talk to, lobby, try to convince men who ran the show back then completely. Was that at all difficult for you?
Well, it was, I guess it was, but we were so consumed with worry about this, what was happening, that I don't think we let it bother us.
You didn't? No. And what about socially? What about socially? Small community, as you said, much of the community was for the North Wales development. 2,400 acres, 10,000 homes, is that right?
It was 31,400 people.
People, right.
And in a county that had 26,000 people. So Warrenton would have been a suburb of this community.
So did you lose friendships, or were there strains socially in the community?
Yeah, I think so. I certainly lost the friendship of the editor of the paper. Because we had been very good friends, and he used to come out to dinner with us. And then all of a sudden we were at daggers drawn. And it made me realize how terribly important it is to have a newspaper, a free newspaper, you know.
And that's when the Fauquier Citizen, of which I was unaware when we started our paper, sprang to life, right?
Right. And then Julian Scheer would periodically, we would publish the, what was the name of it?
The Bugle?
The what? Bugle. The Bugle, yes. Published, what was it? All the news that causes a fit. And that was Julian Scheer, and Julian was wonderful. Julian would write our ads. We'd put these full-page ads in the paper, and then we had Bill Backer, who was one of the top advertising people in the country, and he would send down ads from McCann Erickson in New York that we would put in the paper, and so we had a lot of talent.
High-powered talent.
Very, very. Francis Green, wonderful lawyer. Francis was our main stalwart person. And without Francis, we would never have won that.
Till Hazel, right?
It's what?
Till Hazel.
Till Hazel was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, Till Hazel's reputation is that of the guy who developed Northern Virginia, right?
Well, what happened with Till Hazel was that the Commonwealth's attorney who was part of the small group of men who were helping the Cooper Company. Mm-hmm. And when he said that you can't stop this company because they are vested, and so all the effort you're making is worthless. And my husband said, that's not true. They have not put enough money into it to be vested. And so I went to John Adams and told him. And John Adams said, well, I will go to the best lawyer in Virginia, and he lives right on the other side of the Pignut Mountain. Mm-hmm. And that was how Till came into being.
Really interesting that...
And that was wonderful. That was wonderful getting Till Hazel. But we had wonderful lawyers from Washington, and then Francis Green, mm-hmm. who was absolutely wonderful. We had a lot of talent on our side. And a lot of laughs. Because we had some very amusing people who were mm-hmm. involved. And so we did more laughing than crying.
So because of the requirement to bond 100 miles of internal roads.
That was a major.
That was the thing that
That was the thing that really stopped it.
That Cooper, it had the zoning.
And that was Till Hazel,
who
held their feet to the fire mm-hmm. on that particular issue. Mm-hmm. And it would never, without Till, it wouldn't have happened.
How was your relation with him thereafter? I mean, he lived in one of the most
very
beautiful,
friendly. And
never turned Fauquier to develop. Did his development in Northern Virginia?
We had a major fight with the Hazel family over the interchange, mm-hmm. at Thoroughfare Gap. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Hazel said to me, he said, we bought this valley to subdivide it, really? Develop it.
Wow.
And so, in those days, I didn't know Till Hazel, mm-hmm. but we started off a rocky start.
Mm-hmm. It never happened, though.
No.
Wow. How did the North Wales battle, for lack of a better term, set the stage for what has followed?
Well, it was absolutely very, very important. It got us going in the right direction at the right time. It mm-hmm. put us in a position to cope with what came down the road. Mm-hmm. And I consider the North Wales thing was a great blessing. As long as we licked it, it made us sophisticated in a hurry. Mm-hmm. And so I think it helped us when other things happened.
Was it more difficult with North Wales to get people's attention and to organize
Absolutely.
Than it has become now?
Oh, people weren't used to being involved in things like that. It was a brand new world. Mm-hmm. And so it was difficult in the beginning. And, I could empty a room in a minute by bringing the subject up. I remember going to Bobby Van Rooyen about North Wales, and he lived right on the edge of it. Mm-hmm. And he just absolutely couldn't have been less interested.
Really?
And then he came around, but in the beginning, people just were not used to worrying about things like that.
Hmm. So did you ever feel like...
it was a good time town, mm-hmm. and people... It was brand new way of life.
Mm-hmm. So there have been dozens of battles since. And it always occurred to me, and maybe I'm wrong, that I used to compare you folks to a tennis ball machine. It doesn't matter what's happening on the other side of the net. Every 7 seconds, you're just hitting one back. Did you ever take one off and say, it's only a 20-lot subdivision, no big...
No, you sort of had a tiger by the tail, mm-hmm. and you couldn't let go. and it was really a period of warfare, semi-warfare.
Yeah, and in some of your writings, I would suggest that you may have divided people into white hats and black hats, villains and heroes.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean, no question about it. Right?
Sure did.
How did you get along with folks on the other side historically? I mean, were there those who were, for lack of a better term...
Well, I don't think I had anything to do with them.
That was...
Yeah, I didn't like them.
Mm-hmm. And did that solve...
And there weren't many of them. There were very, very few.
Still there were, quite a few folks in the business community.
In the business community, there were a few.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But Charlie Silheimer knows all about this. He was very much involved.
So, what were the big takeaways from those early fights? What did we learn?
Well, it was the losing of your life, your community. It was absolutely, it was the destruction of all that we loved around here, all of a sudden we were living in this lovely country, all of a sudden we would be living in a city. Mm-hmm. It was a very, it had never happened in America before. I mean, I think my theory is that my generation played too many games of Monopoly. Mm-hmm. And I think people love those little houses. And I remember the first subdivision I ever saw was opposite Fort Myer coming out of Washington. Mm-hmm. And I saw all these little white houses, identical houses, and I'd never seen that before in my life.
But we're an exploding country, and people have to live somewhere.
Well, it was. But we were lucky in having, we had Loudoun next door to us. Loudoun and Fauquier County were very similar counties, both very big agricultural counties. And Faukier's, I think, today it's number 4 in agricultural production, and Loudoun was right up there. Mm-hmm. And Loudoun was a step ahead of us. And they got the planning going, I think, a little bit before we did. Mm-hmm. And they were doing all the right things. And then Loudoun elected the wrong board of supervisors, and it was Katie Bother-Durr.
And that's the point you made in something, I think in the South Wales book, one of the important takeaways was paying great attention to the board of supervisors.
Right? It is the most important thing for everybody to make sure who you vote for, a supervisor. When I was a child, my parents could never have told you who their supervisor was. Mm-hmm. Taxes remained even, never changed, and there was no work except, that they met for half a day once a month, I think.
Oh, when I came to town, Dave Botts reviewed the long-distance phone bill at every meeting, and they discussed every livestock claim from a farmer during the meeting.
Well, it was that, and if you wanted to get your road paved or something like that, but never ever did my mother and father ever know who their supervisor was. And then that changed dramatically.
Yeah. So
today, I think this election coming up is so important.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. I was hoping you would get to that. What do you make of where we are? This election, you've got several...
I think we can lose the county if we get the wrong board of supervisors. We can lose this county, and I think it's to me it's much more important than the presidential election.
So what do you make of the politics today in the county? Are you paying much attention? I'm sure you are.
Yes, I do pay attention. And I think people are very much aware of what the situation is. It's not like when we started, nobody, I could empty a room in a minute just by mentioning land use things, But I think now people are very clued in.
And the joke in Fauquier is everybody wants to be the last one in, right? Everybody wants to slam the door. So You said it's been easier to motivate and attract people today, and many folks who are living in those subdivisions of which you may not have approved are
Absolutely.
years. And
How many?
40 this
40,
year,
really?
40. And it has doubled in population
Yeah.
since I came here in 1983, which sounds big, but then you talk about Loudon, which has increased sevenfold.
550,000.
Right, sevenfold in population during the same period.
Yeah, I think Fauquier is about 75,000.
Correct.
And Loudon is 500,000.
Without,
And we started out together, sort of, you know.
yeah,
And Loudon made some bad choices of their supervisors. And that's what did it to Loudon, was electing the wrong people.
and in this county, we have only 5 supervisors. So if you get 3 votes, you can do
That's
whatever
right.
you want.
You're dead. If you don't
So
do it.
should we have 7 supervisors? Or
Is
not?
what?
Should we have more supervisors?
No. I
5
don't
is a
think
good
so.
number, huh?
No, I think it's much better having 5. I think that's an advantage to us,
Okay.
having 5.
So are you talking to any of the candidates this year? Supporting?
I'm listening.
Okay. Okay. As you look at the county and the way it's changed, since I've been here, Bealton has grown up. Marshall is redeveloping after decades and decades. Warrenton, of course, has grown. Highways have happened. The hospital has grown. Banks have come and gone. But as you look across the expanse of Fauquier, not just the countryside, but the people and the institutions, how do you judge the place? How do you describe it socioeconomically, civically? What kind of place do we live in?
Well, I think it's still a wonderful place to live. And I think it's a wonderful Warrenton. It's a wonderful town. I have a lot of complaints about Warrenton, but I think basically it's a wonderful town. And, I just think if we can avoid making mistakes in electing the wrong people, I think Fauquier County is good for, who knows how long. But I think we all have to pay attention. I don't think we can afford. When I think of my parents,
Right.
they never had to worry about it, but I think we have to worry about it.
So what are the big battles to come? Water is still a tremendous issue.
What is?
Water,
Well, I'm extremely interested in water because I think we have very little of it. And I think that is going to govern the future, I think, the future of the county. Because I think that we can't afford to grow. I think Warrenton is sitting on top of its watershed. I can look out of my bedroom window and I see the whole watershed,
right?
bounded by the Pignut Mountains. I have one of the headwaters in my little place up on the mountain near you. And the other one is very close to you, too.
Right.
The
Yeah.
two,
Yeah.
right
Well,
besides where you live.
and I'm hauling
And
water for
that-
Ellen's garden right now.
You're doing what?
Hauling water in a 300-gallon tank on
You're
my
hauling
truck.
water?
Well, our well just won't keep up with it. Now, she's got too much garden, okay? But,
Oh my God, that's worse.
but you and other folks helped stop 2 planned water impoundments for Fauquier that many suggest would have provided
Where were they?
Salem and Auburn Dam.
And what was the other one?
Salem, near Marshall, in the Carter Run Valley.
Yeah. I don't think we stopped the impoundment of the water.
We didn't.
We stopped the development.
Okay.
I'm sure we didn't stop the
Didn't
impoundment.
stop. Auburn Dam would have
No, I
happened.
think when they couldn't do the development, they didn't need to get the water.
So as you talk about your concern for water, what do? We continue to rely entirely outside of the town of Warrenton on groundwater.
Well, yeah. Well, they have 3 wells. I think wells are very iffy. I think Warrenton is limited in what it can do because of its lack of water.
But certainly Warrenton is much better shape than Marshall and Northern Fauquier. Of course, Marshall is the only settlement of size in Northern Fauquier. But people talk about, I'm jumping around, but agriculture. We would like, or many would like, I believe Fauquier should develop an abattoir to make beef, a more profitable enterprise for local farmers rather than shipping cattle to feedlots in the Midwest, yada, yada, yada. But we may not even have enough water for an abattoir, right?
I don't
know either.
I really don't know.
I don't either.
But I'm very much in favor of anything that helps the farmers. But I think water is going to be a major issue.
So if a modest water impoundment near Marshall would help farmers and
Oh, I think it'd be a very good idea.
Okay. I never thought I'd hear you
Nobody. I don't know anybody who would be against that.
Interesting. You also said, and that you're kind of on that now. You, when you were named Citizen of the Decade by the newspaper in 1987, you said, "I resent the term no growth." You said it makes me angry. No growth, being labeled a no growther.
Yeah, I don't think we ever were for no growth. We were for normal growth. And what we were seeing was abnormal growth. And all we need is to go along the way the world has gone along for millions of years. But what was happening was artificial. It had never happened before, and people were just blindsided because of the speed with which these communities were being developed.
Okay. Any other big issues top of mind over the years? I mean, there have been the countywide rural downzoning, which was...
Is what?
The rural downzoning.
Yeah.
That was rather controversial, but it happened.
Yeah.
Other battles that stand out?
Oh dear.
Walmart.
Charlie, what?
Walmart.
Oh, Walmart. Yeah, I hated to see all these big shops coming and the destruction of Main Street. I mean, it was you could buy, when I was young, you could buy everything on Main Street. I even bought a coffin on Main Street. and it was, you could buy some aspirin, you could buy a hairnet, you could, all these things that you no longer can.
Right.
And I think that's what towns are for, is main streets. And I think that's a pity.
Yeah, agreed.
But I don't think there's anything you can, I mean, they're there now.
And the world certainly has changed. Everybody thought Walmart was going to kill mom and pop retail. Nobody contemplated Amazon. Walmart seems almost benign today, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Vint Hill was another. Vint Hill?
Is what?
Vint Hill.
Yeah.
When the discussion started, the Army was going to abandon Vint Hill, and the county began talking about standing up a economic development, redevelopment authority. You and others, correctly?
Georgia Herbert.
Others opposed.
Georgia Herbert was right in the middle of it.
Right. Well, a lot of people. Yeah, as were you. And many suggested, I think Harry Atherton, your son-in-law, said it ought to go back to rural zoning. Just, turn it back into what it is.
I don't think he ever suggested rural zoning, but...
well, then the newspapers I read were wrong.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the issues were.
Well, the wastewater treatment plant there was a big issue. The abatement of environmental problems was a big issue.
Yeah.
Anyway, it happened.
Yeah.
And here we are 25 years later. It's pretty much done as far as I know. The EDA is gone. The FAA is there, a non-tax-paying entity, as you in the past have noted. Yeah. But there are a lot of businesses there. There is some housing, and there's some more housing coming. But how do you judge, or how do you look at what has happened with Vint Hill?
Well, what's happening at Vint Hill right now is not worrying me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think it's there. You know, that was a farm that used to belong to a great friend of my father's, and we were sorry to see the farm go. But when it did, it took that piece of land into a different category.
Right.
And so I think I'm not worried about Vint Hill.
Okay.
I probably should be, but I'm not.
No, I don't think so. Editorially, I would say that there have been some rough spots along the way, but it essentially has done what it set out to do. It's put it back on the tax roll. Yeah. It's generated jobs. Yeah. There are a lot of businesses there. There are a lot of businesses there.
I have no problem with that.
So it hadn't been the disaster that some might have predicted,
no,
right?
It does not.
Okay. What do you... The future of farming is something...
Future of what?
Farming.
I think farming is going great, doing very well. Mm-hmm. I think, Fauquier County is one of the top agricultural counties, and I think I don't see... Do you see problems?
Well, just the lack of income.
Lack of what?
Income. There are only a handful of farms in Fauquier that generate more than $100,000 a year. Most of them, including the people who farm our land.
I'm astonished that any farm generates $100,000.
Yeah, right.
But I think that the farming is extremely important to this county.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
I think it's extremely important to the country as a whole. I think Fauquier County was the leading producer of orchard grass seed. I don't know if it still is or not, but it was in the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that farms they're good farms, and as long as the people go on farming, I think it's...
Yeah, it's a labor of love for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm not staying awake at night.
Okay. Conservation easements have done a lot to protect this county. A quarter of the county's private land is in conservation easement. Until recently, the most of any county in Virginia. Albemarle, I believe, is number one now. Yeah. And certainly, conservation easements prevent housing on the same land. At the same time, I hear critics in the farm community say, it has become very easy now to get tax breaks without farming your land. And there seems to be a disconnect between potential starting farmers who cannot find or afford land and perhaps conservation easement landowners who have no interest in cattle roaming their property. I don't know if you see that, but I hear it in talking to people in the farm community.
I was unaware of that.
And I'm particularly reminded on the ride from Rectortown to Upperville over toward Rokeby. You come around a curve, and there used to be this massive pasture land that now is just going back to forest. And maybe that's a good thing, but it's not contributing to agriculture. And I just wonder if anybody else is concerned about that it's you don't watch Yellowstone probably, but
well, I have not been concerned about that, but perhaps I should be. But I haven't really heard much about it.
Well, some just suggest there could be more communication between the conservation community and the agriculture community, the farmers, and particularly young farmers are having a tough time.
Our place is under easement. Mm-hmm. And we have a wonderful guy who runs cattle on it. Mm-hmm. And it's a good arrangement for him, and it's a good arrangement for us. Mm-hmm. And I think I hope it's happening.
It's happening in a lot of places.
A lot of places.
But again, conservation easements allow.
Because I think that there's there's a cooperation between the people who own the land and can't farm it and the people who want land, and they can get it for very little money or no money.
Mm-hmm. Right. Here's a wild card.
Is what?
A wild card. A wild card. A trick question.
Oh, my question.
For me, a trick question.
Oh, okay.
What do you think Merle Fallon would say?
Merle.
Merle Fallon.
Yes.
You remember Merle?
Oh, I do.
Your friend Merle.
I do.
What do you think Merle Fallon would say if I called him up and asked him about you?
About me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think he'd say, "That idiot woman." I don't have time to think about her.
Oh, well. Merle is retired, and I caught him the other day outside of Fredericksburg where he lives, and I just asked him that. Somebody who was on the other side, and you'll be pleased to know he described you as, quote, a worthy adversary who approached everything with honesty. We had different perspectives on things, but he gives you credit for always being an honest broker and no dirty tricks. So there were no T-shirts, no bumper stickers apparently with Merle.
Nothing like that.
No. It's also been fun for me to watch your political involvement over the years, and your political involvement.
My what?
Political involvement?
Yeah.
Yours? You never ran for office.
No.
Why not?
Never thought I'd get elected.
Fair answer. It's just fascinating to me, and it happens around here a lot because there are a lot of Republicans who are conservationists, and if you deal in stereotypes, you have a hard time reconciling that sometimes. So I looked at your contributions, and 75% of them go to Democrats, historically, over the years. But I know you've voted in Republican primaries.
Well, I was a Republican.
Right.
For years I was a Republican.
Right. Well, that's what I'm trying to...
I worked for the Republican Party.
I'm trying to understand that, right?
Yeah,
Of course,
definitely.
and things have changed.
But I no longer am.
Right.
I despise the Republicans.
Well, I wasn't trying to go there, but... But it is interesting to see that today you support Democrats, and of course, I've got an old Piedmont Virginian down here that I'm going to break out that shows you what the Democratic Party looked like in 1971. But the first time I really remember you in action was in 1984 down here at what was Warrenton Junior High School, now Warrenton Middle School.
Yeah.
J. Kenneth Robinson, the congressman from Winchester, Republican from Winchester, retired. And Guy Farley and French Slaughter were seeking the Republican nomination for Congress. Do you remember that?
No.
Okay.
I don't remember. What did I do?
Well, apparently you worked the phones a lot.
I did.
Farley had energized the emerging evangelical element of the Republican Party, and they were bussing them in, and you and others were working the phones on behalf of French Slaughter. There were more than 1,100 people at a mass meeting in that auditorium.
I have absolutely no recollection of that.
Yeah, the things that stick in my head.
I'll take your word for it.
Okay, sorry. So, the letters to the editor. You've written at least 300, right? What's your approach to doing that? I'll tell you what I notice. I notice that they are short, that you don't waste a whole lot of time. You make a point and get out. How?
I got interested in letters to the editor and the North Wales thing because I kept noticing, I never even read a letter to the editor before, but I kept noticing that there were letters written by the strange people that normally didn't write letters, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, were writing these erudite letters. And then it occurred to me that it was being done by the Cuba Company, you know, giving these guys letters and they signed them. People that you'd never, ever in a million years would have written a letter to the editor. So anyway, that got me. I thought they think it's important, so maybe it is.
So were your early letters longer than they are now? Do you remember? Were your
really?
early letters to the editor longer?
Probably.
I mean, now you write, they're almost like haiku sometimes. You write, you know, they're 4 and 5 sentences, but you get right to the point and get out. Do you spend much time thinking about how you're going to approach this and what you're going to say?
Well, I guess I do. Fair amount.
So, among other things, you have been here a long time. To what do you attribute your longevity?
Too mean to die.
Too mean to die.
I think so.
Really?
I don't know, because none of my family ever lived half as long as I have. I don't know.
So what are you working on now?
What am I going to do?
What are you working on today, now?
Well, I'm working on the garden a lot. Mostly things around the garden.
Issues are pretty quiet.
I don't think I'm involved in any county issues. Am I, Fairly? I'm very interested in the local politics.
It's going to be a busy year.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there questions you thought I would ask you that I haven't asked you so far?
What questions haven't you?
What haven't I asked you that I should be asking you about?
Gosh.
Lunch? No.
I think you've covered the waterfront.
Okay. Well, we're getting near the end of the hour, so I'm wondering if anybody else has a question that perhaps we haven't covered or a topic that we haven't covered that we should. And sure. Go.
Yes, hi. Mrs. Porter, your life and your work has been a real inspiration to me and to those of us who've been involved in the Amazon data center struggle here in the town of Warrenton, for the Blackwell site in Warrenton. And I was just wondering if you had any words of advice or encouragement.
Well, I would say never give up. Just keep on.
Anyone else? Sue?
I think you should talk about Hope's
Oh, what?
Hope's rent a mob.
Rent a mob? Now we're getting into the good stuff. Rent a mob.
My rent a mob. Well, I guess Sue's referring to, I had by telephoning 3 people, I could get hold of about 200 people
Quickly.
quickly.
Wow.
I guess that's,
Well, you gave everybody, many people, 5 names, and when there was an emergency, I'm telling you, you would call one person, that person would call somebody else.
that's right.
And
Yeah, I could get hold of a lot of people. But I used, when the public hearings for the Board of Supervisors, I didn't want it known that I was getting people to come.
We never suspected.
Charlie Whitehouse, who had been bringing a contingent from the northern end, he would come up to me and he'd snappy salute and click his heels and he'd say, "Well, we're all here, Hopi." And I was hoping for anonymity.
So you essentially had phone trees.
Phone tree.
That's how it started,
Yeah,
phone
yeah,
trees.
I have a phone
But
tree.
the other thing she stood in front of Safeway and the John Andrew with petitions. Well, they wouldn't let her do it between the lettuce and the carrots. So she had out in the parking lot. Single-handedly, she said, I don't know how many names you got, because I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Rolled them down the middle of the high school,
Mm-hmm.
ran to impress the supervisors. I think he did, I forgot what they did.
But you know, I think our finest moments were with Julian and his papers. Julian and his the papers he.
And you used to come every Sunday morning, and you two would figure out what was going to go in that paper. Julian was making outrageous.
Well, he was an enormous asset. I mean, we had some really wonderful people who were.
Very talented. You couldn't have afforded the talent you
No,
had.
Bill Backer, one of
Right.
the top advertising men in the country, you know, and we were very fortunate in that.
I have not so much a question, and Hope has heard this story before, but I think it's such a funny one that people might appreciate it. And you mentioned Bill Backer, and Bill and Hope worked very closely together through all of these various battles. And Bill, who's passed away now, but Bill always told the story that there was, at one point, one of the organizations, CFFC or one of them, had to take a loan out from the bank to fund some activity they were doing. And Bill was signing the note as a co-signer. And he showed the bank his assets sufficient to cover the note. And when the loan officer asked him, "What are your liabilities?" and he said, "My only liability is my friendship with Hope Porter."
I have a different memory from my mother's of the gold card. And what I remember was that when Ann Douglas, my sister, was arrested, and Mommy saw that, she came up to the sheriff and said, like, you correct me if I'm wrong, and said, you should arrest me, not my daughter. And Joe Higgs said, Hope, there is nothing in the world I'd rather do than arrest you.
Yeah, my question, first off, thank you so much for all your work. My daughter and I here, we're direct beneficiaries as we are a whiffle tree right next to North Wales. So it would be the parking lot of North Wales. So anyway, thank you so much. What the question came to my mind was, why you and not someone else? People were mentioning here, you're standing in front of a giant,
Well, I'll tell you exactly why me.
Let me just, one hypothesis I want to hear you answer is, why you not someone else? And why do you care so much? Why do you fight so hard? Why did you spend so much time and energy on this? And the thought that came to mind is like, could it be so much about your childhood where you got to gallivant around on your pony and your affection and your attachment to the place? Obviously your family is here, but I just wonder, obviously, there's all kinds of mysteries in people's lives that make them the way they are, but could your childhood sort of attachment and affection to the land and to the place be instrumental?
It had absolutely everything to do with it, because I had a pony and I was able to ride over the countryside. I got to know the country. I had a wonderful childhood in this county, and it certainly seemed to be worthwhile fighting for it. And I never regretted 1 minute. And I still think it's a wonderful county and worth fighting for.
Larry asked whether people who have come in with development proposals have taken seriously the county's water situation and concern that the county.
I think some people did, and an awful lot of people didn't. I think a lot of people came in to make a fast buck. And 30, 40, 50 years ago, development open land was almost like a fever. It all started after the Second World War, and all of a sudden, everybody was doing it. And every piece of land, every time I'd see guys in a big black car, 3 guys sitting on the back seat with maps, I would know that they were looking to put a subdivision someplace. And it was all, we weren't used to it. We didn't know in the beginning. It took some time to get used to it and figure out what to do, what we should be doing. But it was, I mean, my parents never had to cope with anything like that. You know, it was all, we were just blindsided after World War II. It just all of a sudden happened to us.
Yes, sir. Charlie?
Well, you made a couple interesting comments. One was, well, a lot of interesting comments. But one was about the good things that had
About
come
what?
out of the good things that had come out of the North Wales fight.
Yeah.
One of the good things that I'd like you to elaborate on was maybe creation of things like PEC that never would have come into being.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Without that. And the second is that Fauquier County and its citizens, we've talked about the wonderful people who were in on all these fights. And the one thing that Fauquier that I've seen now that we live in Orange and lived in Fauquier for so many years is that Fauquier's citizens were never just the NIMBYism group. They always believed in doing things countywide or area-wide. And it was Fauquier that paid to get all of those going. And it was Fauquier's people, mainly you, who really drove the engine to make these things happen. PEC has never expanded its area. It started with 9 counties, and there's still 9 counties. And it was all thought out ahead of time. And the Fauquier citizens, as other counties wanted to join PEC, PEC would provide the funds and the expertise to get organizations going in other places, but kept its area as the Piedmont. And there are a number of things I'd ask you to comment on.
Well, I think
Because I think those are important.
certainly North Wales gave us PEC. That was formed right at sort of the end.
Right.
And the Mid-Fauquier Association too. And the Mid-Fauquier Association came because Bill Backer had formed the Upper Fauquier Association. So it seemed logical for us to have a Mid-Fauquier, and then there became a Southern Fauquier, and we covered the whole county. But PEC, of course, is so marvelous because it covers a whole region, and it all came out of North Wales.
And those organizations that you mentioned are now citizens for Fauquier County.
That's right.
the
So Mid-Fauquier
upper,
became
middle, and
citizens.
Southern Fauquier
Yeah.
organizations, now is CFFC.
And so CFFC took up from upper and
Took
mid,
up the spot.
and upper and mid. Yeah. So we're,
Last one. Yes, ma'am.
It seems as though your special genius was your foresight with North Wales, that you saw that it was not only that particular development, but what might follow. And I wondered whether you see the data center issue in the same light.
well,
That this is not merely a fight about this one site here, as inappropriate as it might be, but is in fact opening the door that would transform the county.
well, I think right now, I think the terribly important thing are these, these, what are they? What do you call them?
The data center.
The data centers. I think they are just something that just too awful for the county. But that seems to me to be the major problem facing the county now. What do you think? What do you think?
Well, there's not much residential development now,
Yeah.
right? And
No, I think
the data centers produce a lot of tax income. I think the great concern is proximity to homes and power lines. The power lines are the big concern.
yeah. And I think, isn't water?
Yeah, I think I don't want to get into a debate, but to a lesser extent, the water here. But so everybody's praising you. Georgia said you inspired her to run for the Board of Supervisors. Your activism
Everybody's too kind.
inspired her. Walter Munster, in a story years ago, who's a former Planning Commission member who's no longer with us, said, "Hope doesn't show up just for the fire. She shows up for everything." A lot of praise, a lot of awards. How do you process that as the accidental activist? What do you
Very
make
grateful.
What do you make of all the fuss?
Very grateful. I don't think I've deserved half of them. But I think people have been very kind. On all walks of life.
Made a few friends?
Made a lot of friends.
Lost a couple?
Lots of friends.
Okay.
Lost a few.
Lost a
which
few.
I care about.
All right.
No, I made lots of friends. And I think that's the best thing. I think I have come out ahead.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Oh dear, how do I do? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you want to say something about what's next? Oh, Doug's going to say something about what's next. This?
No. On all of your seats, or on most of the seats, there is a notice about Sundays at 2. As Maria said at the beginning of this, it is the intention that this become an ongoing series. We're starting out quarterly and possibly then expanding to bi-monthly or maybe monthly, who knows? But starting with 4, and the next one will be on October 15th, and it's Major Warner, who has been born and raised here in Fauquier and now has recently been appointed as the Fauquier Superintendent of Schools and has had a remarkable life here. So he will be the next person that Lou will be having conversations with on October 15th. We have heard from Sir Peter Crane, who is the head of the Oak Springs Garden Foundation, actually just today, that he's delighted to be participating in this. He can't fit into our February slot, but he's committed to April. So we have 3 of the 4 of this series. Peter Crane is a distinguished both scientist and horticulturalist. He was the head of the Kew Gardens outside of London, has had an academic career at University of Chicago and Yale School of Forestry and a brilliant career, but now is residing up in Upperville and doing wonderful things at Oak Springs Garden Foundation. So that'll be an interesting one to look forward to. In addition to the conversations at 2, the library has also started a nonfiction book club, and this club is going to be led by Bob Jacobs. And many of you, if any of you have been in school within the last at Fauquier's High School within the last 40 years, you may know Bob, or if you like me have had children who were at Fauquier High School in the last 40 years, you know that Bob is a very highly regarded educator who's been a teacher for about 40 years, a history and political science. His geopolitics course at Fauquier High School is legendary. He is a gifted speaker, and he will be leading the nonfiction book club, the first session of which will be July 26th. And the book is, and There Was Light. It's the Abraham Lincoln and the American Struggle, John Meacham's newest book. So for all of you nonfiction enthusiasts, this is a wonderful opportunity to join in a discussion that I think will be quite a welcome one. So thank you all for being here. There's refreshments. Maria, anything else?
Absolutely, please. We have bookmarks with the titles that will be part of the nonfiction book club. We also have a survey for you to fill out. What we need to know, Hope's phone tree might have worked once upon a time, but we've gone to social media now, and we're getting the word out to you all. Same principle, but different medium. But at any rate, there are papers that we're going to hand out to you. What we want to know is, how did you hear about this program? We'd like to have suggestions for future programs. And really importantly, if you have an email address, if you would give us your email address, if you would like to be kept up to date with programs like this and others from the library. It's essential that we develop this database because it's a challenge getting the word out today about programs like this. So please help us out. And you are invited to stay for refreshments. We're not in any hurry, as I said. Lou.
One other thing, thank you to Bob Rankin, who is the wizard of audio-visual recording in Fauquier County.